Okay, Chair, thank you very much for your patience. It has obviously gone 4 o'clock. We are now established on the EasyComp system. Are you happy for me to start with the housekeeping?
If we're ready to go live, then yeah. Broadcast, yeah.
Yes, Chair, we are ready to go live.
Okay, so if we're ready,
Okay.
go live, and then you can giving, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Good afternoon all. Welcome to the Democratic Services Committee of the 10th of February 2025. May I remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and archived for future viewing. Please could I ask all participants to use the raise hand function during the course of the meeting and to make sure that their camera and microphone is live when actively participating. Please could you refrain from using the chat function for debate, but rather make sure that that is on screen for the sake of the recording. Thank you, Chair. That concludes the housekeeping.
Penawda a chroeso i'r cyfarfod. My name is Councillor Ian Johnson. I'm the Chair of the Democratic Services Committee. We don't have an interpreter present today, so this meeting will be conducted in English. We have 3 main items under discussion today, which include an update from the Welsh Local Government Association Heads of Democratic Services Network, the Learning Needs Analysis Self-Assessment Exercise Outcome, and the Forward Work Programme for this committee looking to the future. So on that, can I therefore start with item 1, which is apologies for absence. Do we have any received, Amy?
None to myself, Chair. May I check with James whether or not he's had any direct to himself, please? I take that as no, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2 then is the minutes of our previous meeting from November 2024. So you have, is everybody happy for us to move those minutes? I can see Councillor Thomas with his hand up.
Yeah, just one very small typo. Under determination 5 on page 3, it's got me down as saying that talking about the remuneration rather than the remuneration. Should be remunerated rather than remunerated. It's a small typo and easily done. But
thank you, Councillor Thomas. So if we can just check for any other minor typographical errors, but otherwise we're happy with the contents. Is that okay?
Otherwise, I move the minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. And could somebody second that, please? Councillor Goodwin, good job. Thank you very much. Okay, item 3, therefore, is declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Is there anybody wants to make any declarations? I see no hands raised. Item 4 is the update from the Welsh Local Government Association Heads of Democratic Services Network, and I believe the Head of Democratic Services, James Langridge Thomas, is presenting this. James?
Thank you, Councillor John. So the purpose of this report is to provide members with an update of key activities being undertaken nationally, coordinated by the WLGA.
Can I just stop you a moment, James? I'm getting some feedback from you there. I don't know where that's coming from.
Oh, it won't be a second.
I assume we're just having a moment or two while James sorts out the feedback by, I'm guessing, moving room, and therefore not having feedback from other computers within the same room there. Is that okay, James? I think you're on mute at the moment.
Apologies, members, for any feedback you may have received there. I have moved rooms now, so if anyone does receive any further feedback, please do let me know on that front. So I'll restart again in terms of the item. So The purpose of the report is to provide members with an update on the key activities being undertaken nationally, coordinated by the Welsh Local Government Association, WLGA, within the Heads of Democratic Services Network across democratic services in Wales. It isn't an exhaustive list of activities being undertaken, but it's here today for the committee to note and make members aware of the work being undertaken to support the council in discharging its functions. I've just outlined the 4 main areas within the report, so video conferencing, electoral reform, training, and scrutiny self-evaluation. And I'll just talk to each item a little bit more. As I'm sure members will appreciate, I'm still relatively new to the post, so some of this work does predate me, and I may not be able to field all the queries in significant detail. However, any points if I'm unable to provide a comprehensive answer, I will take away and provide a response to all members of the committees and issue appended to the minutes. In terms of VPAV, firstly, I'll cover off video conferencing briefly, just for clarity from the off. This is not a report around its functionality or its history within the council, which I know this committee is more than well versed around, but a snapshot of how the council can share good practice with sector peers. So we were asked to present at the Audiovisual Hybrid and Streaming Regional Seminar held at Banner Britannia's headquarters, based upon our relationship with the supplier VPAV and wider knowledge in terms of our journey surrounding this area of work, and to give a very much warts and all approach amongst our sector peers. So the areas covered included how we are supported, the council's approach to multi-location meeting policy, the technical and equipment infrastructure, implementation and training, what have been the challenges, and what is the potential future, with an offer to public bodies to come and view our infrastructure and look at our ways of working, etc. Since this session, and we have one council approach us, Bridgend, in terms of coming to see how we operate this kind of functionality within the Vale. It's worth sharing that on the day, I wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, but Amy, who is in attendance today, she'll be able to share that peers were genuinely impressed with our implementation of the solution and also commended the honesty surrounding the challenges and the positivities, while also looking at the future opportunities. So I'll just move on to elections briefly. So I'll talk briefly about electoral reform, and I will offset there's a little bit of asterisk with this update that the subject matter experts sit within the electoral services team. As members will also see within the quite comprehensive appendix, there's been a significant amount of activity within the space with a range of updates. I have just picked out a few pertinent updates that have been pulled out of the main report itself, rather than retelling every single item that's within that update. So notably that work is ongoing with the automatic registration pilot, who are currently testing a range of scenarios which need to be concluded by September 2025 to allow for the Electoral Commission to start the legislative processes. Following this, there's information surrounding the consultation on the diversity inclusion guidance for political parties, which asks parties to consider a range of areas ahead of its publication later in the spring, with a view to this to be implemented for the 2026 Senedd election. In a similar vein, Welsh Government are also preparing the regulations required to underpin the Elections and Elected Body Wales Act, building on feedback from the pilot Access to Elected Office Fund, which provided support to disabled people standing in the 2021 and 2022 elections. They'll consult on the draft regulations early 2025, and will also be contacting interested parties next year to help with the design of the financial and non-financial schemes to support people with other protected characteristics and socioeconomic challenges. So just briefly in terms of moving on later in the report then, so just moving on to national training, including the Progressive Community Leadership Programme, which has an overview within the report in Appendix A. This is designed to enable councillors to lead the development of the resilient and sustainable communities, cultivating a culture of empowerment and participated decision-making. At time of speaking today, the council does have one registered attendee for the next cohort, Councillor Stephen Yaham, but I feel we do probably need to do a bit of follow-up with members to understand if and what the potential appetite for the training is moving forward and what are the potential barriers to that participation. Alongside this, we're currently working with WLGA to develop some bespoke chairs and vice chairs training, which I won't dwell on for too long as is covered in more detail within the next agenda item, but aims to provide useful practice, individual approaches, and discuss solutions to challenging situations when in the seat. And then finally, just looking at the scrutiny self-evaluation framework. So WLGA have commenced drafting a national framework for councils to reflect upon their scrutiny practices and identify areas for future improvements. It's based upon a range of documents, including both regulatory reports, good practice guides, alongside statutory guidance itself. As you'll see within the report, I'm not going to list them because run through them now. There is quite a list of areas that are being considered within this framework, which is still, I will say, some way off development, and it's anticipated to be released in the next, 12 to 18 months at a minimum. As some members may be aware, the Council is currently about to start reviewing its scrutiny arrangements, as this was a key recommendation from the performance panel assessment published last week, and has used the principles of this framework to support the review, which members will be further updated upon as that work progresses. So that is it in terms of a bit of an update in terms of what's happening in some of those national spaces, in terms of some of the policy direction coming out of WLGA to support the member and democratic role within the national space and how it applies to yourselves locally. Thanks, Chair.
So thank you very much, James. The only recommendation from this report is that we note the contents and agree for it to be disseminated to members to make them aware of the areas of work being undertaken by the Heads of Democratic Services Network with the WLGA. Does anybody have any questions for James on that? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, James, for the presentation. I've got to be honest, I'm quite concerned by some of the content of this report because it seems to have been drawn up in an alternative reality to what's been going on across the world. I mean, particularly the references to diversity, equality and inclusion. A lot of these projects and schemes are rightly being dropped across the Western world. I think Google just last week announced that it was dropping its diversity and inclusion programs for very good reason. I'm quite concerned to see such a prominent focus on it within the report, particularly if we look at some of the things that are included, like the suggestion that political parties should implement voluntary quotas. I mean, in my mind, that's anti-democratic. I think that the best candidate should be elected. We shouldn't be putting candidates into positions on the basis of any other characteristic that they may hold, other than their capability to do the job to the best possible standard means that they should do that job. So I just wanted to highlight my concern that this, according to the WLGA, is still something that is being given very prominent billing when elsewhere it's being dropped, and rightly so. And I would hope that this authority would move away from it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. I mean, I think if James can come in a few moments after, perhaps after Councillor Thomas has also asked any questions. I mean, this is a response, and this is referring to the consultation which comes from Welsh Government. So obviously, as members of staff, as heads of democratic services across Wales, they have to implement government policy. And if you want to argue about, sort of whether those things should be prioritised, then that's a matter for your responses to the consultation. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to disagree profoundly with what Councillor Carroll has just said. He says that diversity and equality and integration policies have been rightly dropped for very good reasons. I have no idea what these very good reasons are. I can't see any very good reasons. It's not about, it's not anti-democratic. It's about improving the democracy, improving the representation of all groups in our society, in our communities, in positions of responsibility, and encouraging political groups and political parties to consider ways in which they can diversify and improve their representation of the people of Wales generally, and of our communities locally, to represent those communities, to include people with disabilities, to include people from communities with protected characteristics, so that their voices can be heard, which I can see only as being a support for democracy. And so, yes, I disagree profoundly, and I move that we note the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Are there any further questions for James, or can I invite James back in to respond to the comments so far?
Thank you, Chair. If no further questions, in terms of response, I will go for. This is essentially, we are, as Councillor Johnson stated, we are. This item is very much around disseminating information on what's happening at a national level in terms of the political and legislative direction. So unfortunately, this isn't around what is happening on a local contextual level. So not able to offer a comment on that one, unfortunately. But this is very much around at a national level what is happening legislatively. So if, as Councillor Johnson alluded to, Councillor Carrick, you do have representations and views surrounding this, it would be the response to respond to the consultation accordingly, which we'd be happy to share details of.
So I do think I suspect that the consultation is already closed, and it's what will happen if I'm reading this correctly is that the guidance on will be the draft guidance. It's the draft guidance here, and so we'll have the final guidance coming in the next couple of months. It's obviously ahead of the Senate election next year, but this is as a report, this is a collection of the discussion points which is taking place at WLGA level, and obviously WLGA have to respond to what is going on at the Senate level, because that's where the responsibility is managed. Councillor Thomas has moved the report. I'm happy to second it, because it's noting the work that's been done and requesting that is forwarded to all councillors. So if there's no opposition to that, then I'll take that as being carried, and we move on to item 5, which is the learning needs analysis self-assessment exercise outcome. And can I ask Amy Rudman to present this, please?
Hello, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, committee, for your time this evening. The committee will see that they have a covering report in front of them and 2 quite detailed appendices. The committee will be aware back in November 22, believe it or not, quite some time has passed since you kindly approved a survey on learning needs analysis for elected members be emailed to all elected members. This obviously was undertaken, and the results of those were collated. You'll see from Appendix A of the report that all of the responses that have been received have been taken into there, and a subsequent comment put against each one. And from doing that assessment exercise, we have created Appendix B, which is a range of topics from now until the end of 2026 for development topics for members that we would like to get your opinion and input on as to whether you are happy to endorse that, which would then allow the Democratic Services team to implement a schedule and arrange necessary training sessions and facilitators to deliver that. The reason it's taken us a little while in Democratic Services to bring this back to you, as I'm sure you'll be aware, there were obviously other demands on the service that meant that we weren't able to assess this thoroughly, but we have managed to get through this piece of work now, and we'd like obviously presenting it to you now to get your input on. So the recommendations before the committee today are to note the comments from members and subsequent comments from the officers at Appendix A, and then to endorse the proposed development topics and the associated delivery timescales that are set out in Appendix B. And I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for the brief presentation there, Amy. Obviously, we've had some time to read the comments that were made by ourselves and colleagues in the survey when it was originally done, and responses to that, and also the timetable that's being suggested for both the refresh of some of the work now that we're in the second half of this council term, and also the areas where people have made suggestions for additional support sessions, information, etc. I think there are two areas which I think should be bumped up the list and taking place sooner rather than later, because they've been relevant to discussions that we've had in council. And for me, those are issues regarding child exploitation and safeguarding. This is something which regularly comes to all of the committees, and so I think in the information session on that should take place as soon as possible. And similarly, the council has made a commitment as a county of sanctuary, and I think the information session on that, the training session on that, should also take place as soon as practical. But I'd be very interested in hearing other councillors' opinions on the topics that are being suggested, and also on the timescale for doing those. I think I note that the end of the programme being proposed is around the end of Christmas 2026, because obviously at that point in time people will be looking towards the election in spring 2027, and also this committee at that point will be determining or working out the requirements for training for the new cohort of councillors when that takes place that summer. So do any councillors have any thoughts on the proposals here, or any questions for Amy? I think now's the right time to indicate. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. It touches on what I said to the last item. I'd like to see the authority drop its DEI and unconscious bias training. I think that would be helpful. And secondly, to disagree with you, Chair, on the County of Sanctuary training. That's not a position that our group endorsed. So if training is provided on that, I would not wish to see it mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Carroll. I will respectfully disagree. They also note Council's position, which was to support becoming a council of sanctuary, and therefore I believe it's important that that we understand issues around community cohesion and discussion, which have frankly been a large part of discussion within the council and wider public area in recent years. Councillor Ewan Goodjohn.
Yeah, just quickly to respond to Councillor Carroll's point. First off, it's not indicated as being mandatory anyway as part of the plan, so no need to object to that. Also to say there's nothing specifically about the County of Sanctuary within the plans either. We can try and support everyone within our communities without having to bring politics into this. But also just to say that it's really good to see the mandatory training on the rules of debate and the code of conduct, and also the new chair and vice chair's training coming very soon down the line. I very much support this because from a lot of different councillors, we have seen some absolutely disgraceful displays regarding the code of conduct and the rules of debate in full council and in other committee meetings, especially of late. So I think this is extremely important, that we make sure that we do things right, that we are a public authority, we're a public body, and we need to be held to account and to hold ourselves to the same high standards we would expect of other public figures. So generally, I would endorse this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Any further speakers? Councillor Neil Thomas.
Yeah, not to speak on it. I support what Ewan's just said, and I'd like to move Officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Any other speakers before I bring Amy back in? No, I guess Amy, can you come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I believe Councillor Goodjohn has made the first point that I was going to make, that obviously, unless obviously stated, none of the sessions are deemed as mandatory. So obviously members would have the option as whether or not to attend. And the only other point to pick up on, Chair, is obviously with regards to the second recommendation, we'd be asking for the committee's endorsement subject to the two topics of child exploitation and county of sanctuary being moved further up the timetables, and with your permission, whether or not that would be acceptable to be covered off within the 2025 calendar year.
I would be happy with that. I mean, technically, I think the topic of discussion is community cohesion, under which we have both Gypsy Roma Traveller and issues relating to asylum seekers and refugees. I would be happy for those two topics to be done during the 2025 calendar year rather than in 2026. I don't know if Councillor Thomas, having moved that, would be.
I was taking that as read as being moved up when I moved the recommendations, with those two being moved up the timescale.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. And I know Councillor Ewan Goodjohn said he supported the principles. I don't know if he wants to formally second or if he wants me to do that.
Yes, happily.
Okay, thank you very much. So Councillor Ewan Goodjohn formally seconding. So if we're happy with those two recommendations, they moved and seconded, then that's now to be actioned by Amy. So I'll assume there's no need to go for anything more on that. We're going to have those. So thank you very much. Item 7 then is the provisional work programme for this committee. Can I ask James Langridge Thomas to speak to this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the report itself, I'm hoping, is pretty self-explanatory, but to cover off, the report proposes a forward work programme for the committee, which has been absent for some time, for this particular committee. The forward programme has been developed to consider the items as standard, cyclical and other. So standard, where they should be on every agenda. Cyclical, where actually we know these things are coming out with regularity, whether that be 6 monthly or annually, such as annual reports, so the IRPW's remuneration reports, and then other items such as other items that are scheduled on an ad hoc basis, which is more than welcome to be suggested by the Chair, the heads of Democratic Service Committee members, other elected members and residents. So as you'll see, there's some suggested topics and structures for meeting moving forward. I will note the dates currently within the forward work programme are provisional and are subject to the municipal calendar being approved shortly. But for example, the meeting scheduled for the 7th of April has now been rescheduled to the 21st of March, and that will be formally communicated to members later this week. The forward work programme, as with every forward work programme for any committee, it is an absolutely set in stone about must follow this for the next 12 months plus, and it'll likely evolve digitally as and when things develop and based on the council's demands and organisational direction of travel, and also members' direction of travel as well. But today I'm seeking committee's endorsement of this as a provisional approach, and welcoming any feedback incorporated just to embed this as a standard approach to how the committee functions moving forward to have a longer term programme of activity. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, James. I think the main point there is that the suggestion that the meeting originally timetabled for Monday, the 7th of April, is being asked to be moved to Friday, 21st of March, so that we can discuss proposals related to reshaping scrutiny as part of a timeline which allows those proposals to go to full council in April, having previously been to cabinets. Are there any comments from committee members about the forward work programme, or anything that people think should be on there, or want to query why something isn't or isn't? Is anybody? Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have some concerns, serious concerns regarding the reshaping scrutiny proposals and the timeframes involved. It is a very major change. It's significant, and it's likely to prove highly controversial. The feedback from my own group hasn't been positive, for example. It's just a matter of weeks away before we move into the new municipal year now. I don't think that such a significant change should be pushed through on such a tight time scale. At the very least, I would like to see it pushed into the next municipal year so that there is proper time available for scrutiny of this and for consultation. So that's a comment to note, really. I appreciate the proposal to move that forward to the 21st of March, but I still don't think that's sufficient. And I think this is, there is the danger of the perception that this is being pushed through without time for appropriate scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. As a leader of a political group, I also have concerns, and I will be raising those, of course, during the process. But for the sake of this meeting, I'm, of course, here as the chair of Democratic Services Committee, and it's been requested that we as a committee fit in with the wider timescale for discussion and implementation of these. Councillor Carroll.
To be clear, that wasn't directed at you, Chair.
I fully appreciate that. I'm just making my own points, sort of while I'm on camera here. Thank you. Any other comments regarding the work plan and the suggestions here, Councillor Thomas?
Just that I take your point, Chair, that the timescale is tight, but I mean we're talking 6 weeks or so before the next meeting of this committee. The procedures and so forth will go through the various scrutiny committees and through chairs and vice chairs as well, and that discussion will take place in good time. We have 6 weeks before the next meeting in which to address any issues that we've got, and I again endorse the officer's recommendations and move them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Any other comments on the forward work programme? If not, then I've seen nobody indicating to speak. Therefore, I shall second the proposal to note these, and also note that we are intending on having the meeting on the 21st of March rather than the 7th of April. So, if that is completed, then I have no items which are urgent under Part 1 and no items which are urgent under Part 2. Therefore, thank you all very much for attending the meeting this afternoon, and I will see you again in a few weeks' time. The formal confirmation of the meeting date will be conveyed to all councillors once that is actually set in stone rather than provisional. Thank you much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon.